A lot of freelancers are almost scared to ask questions because they think, well, if I have to ask a question, then it means I don't know. And if I don't know, then I'm not an expert. It takes courage to do that because you're used to being by yourself and not talking to people. So yeah, but just branching out and just trying to make those connections with other people. It's huge. Any big breakthrough that I've had with my business has never come from just me working by myself. It's come from me talking to people and them sharing information with me, and then something just clicks. And it gives me this big breakthrough.
Basically, what you're looking for is this, oh my God, yes, that's me.
Uh-huh.
Welcome to In the Query.
Hello, nice to be here.
So for those of you watching that don't know, Dana Nicole is a persuasive writer that writes content and copy for B2B companies. We've known each other for quite a while. So the Mediavite Network. We've done some collaborations in the past, and I was super excited to have you in the show. So thank you very much for joining today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Can't wait to start talking about some things.
I know you have a lot of history with SEO yourself. Would love to learn a bit about that, and as well as how you see copy intermingling with SEO. So why don't you give me just the tiniest little bit of background? How did you end up here?
Yeah. Okay. So several years ago, I started my business, and I started doing web and graphic design. This was about 10 years ago. And as I was doing web design, I started learning about SEO because I wanted to build websites that would obviously rank for my clients. And then through that, I used my own website to test SEO strategies. So I was seeing how I could get leads through my blog posts and doing that kind of thing. And I started to realize that I really liked content SEO more than I liked kind of the web design side of things. And so I shifted gears after a few years and started doing more content SEO and working with tech companies to help them write blog posts. And so that kind of brings us to where we are now. I specifically focus on the content side of things. So not so much technical SEO, but more so just writing blog posts, writing different types of content like landing pages. And yeah, that's what my main focus is right now.
So you mentioned that you write copy mostly for tech, right? B2B, SaaS, all that jazz.
Yeah.
What would you say is the number one thing to take into account when you write for tech companies? So let's say the larger we aim for here, the better.
The I find that with tech companies, the biggest thing is that they're going after, like, they have very big content plans. So they target everything from top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel and everything in between. So they're not necessarily looking for keywords that have the highest volume. Obviously, that's something that they consider, but they also really have a big focus on satisfying the user and their end customer and providing content that user wants. So I find like maybe a small business, their biggest focus might be on trying to go after those high volume keywords, whereas these bigger companies, it's still a consideration. They still do want to go after keywords with big volume, but their big goal is being very deliberate in what keywords they go after because they really want to go after content that's going to attract the right type of customer for them. And so that's one thing that I've noticed definitely with some of these bigger companies. They're very intentional with the keywords that they target and the content that they write.
And run me a little bit through how is the experience. And of course, there's going to be a lot of professional side of things here, but I'm asking really more as the human side of things. What's the experience working, writing copy for these kind of tech companies?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of how it would compare to like some of the earlier stuff that I did. I think there's a lot more hands in the bucket. There's more people working on a single piece. So I have in the past wrote for just small businesses. And usually when I write a piece like that, I write the piece. There's really no editors. They don't have on-team editors. They don't have strategists that they work with. And so it's really just me making the piece, handing it off to them, and then that's kind of it. When you're working with a content team, you usually have sort of a content manager who's going to be picking out the strategy. They're going to be reviewing the keywords. They might have a couple other people that they're partnering with to do that. And then they'll pass those keywords off to a strategist. And then the strategist will then put together a brief. The briefs are fairly comprehensive and they go into usually the headers that they want the writer to make sure that they cover. They go into all the key points that they need to cover. They dive into the audience, the specific audience that's going to be reading that piece. because oftentimes tech companies will have, or bigger companies in general will have several personas. And so they'll really specify which persona this piece is for so the writer knows. Obviously, they have all the SEO stuff, so they'll list the keywords that they want to target, the secondary keywords, meta descriptions, meta titles, that kind of stuff. And they also might have the angle that they want the piece to take. So there's a lot that goes into planning the content even before the writer gets the brief. And then the writer will get the brief, write the piece. And then there are maybe one or two editors that then might take a look at everything to finalize everything, fact check, make sure that all the information is there that needs to be after a couple of rounds of revisions. And then it gets scheduled for public. So there's a lot more that goes into one piece of content. It can take maybe a month from when the brief is passed off to the writer until it's finalized and published, at least a month before it's actually live on the website. So a lot goes into it.
Sure, sounds like a lot goes into it. And now I always like to ask this question, and there might be none. Okay, I'm not trying to pre-frame you into answering like there is one.
Right.
Something that I feel is not discussed as much within entrepreneurship and working remotely and being a digital nomad and stuff. I know you're not a nomad,
Yeah.
right? But is nobody talks about the SAC. Everything has a SAC. Everything has
Yeah.
a price to pay, right? What's the SAC of your industry?
So this is a big one. I would say that when you're, especially for me as a freelancer, I'm working in a vacuum almost. And so I find that if I had a team that I could work with, I could get so much more insight faster just by working alongside different people. I find that when people are like, should I go in-house or should I freelance? I always ask them, like, what are your end goals? If you're to go in-house, I find that you could get so much knowledge and information faster just because you're around so many different people. Whereas being freelance, I found that my career has required me to be very proactive in seeking out what I don't know. And sometimes it's hard because you don't know what you don't know until it comes time to, until you need that information. And then you're like, oh, I don't know about that. And so then you have to go and find, you have to teach yourself all these things. Whereas I find if I was just in house, maybe I would have learned all of these skills much faster. I don't, it's not that I think one's better than the other, but I think that's definitely a drawback to being freelance is you need to be very intentional about surrounding yourself with people who have different skill sets and reaching out and talking to them and asking questions and just trying to learn as much as you can because you really are working in a vacuum when you're doing freelance by yourself.
Oh, so painfully true.
Yeah.
Very much. It's interesting the way that you said. I love that you said it because it would be something that I would bring at some point here to ask you. The stuff that you don't know that you don't know, the blind spots. I don't know a single human being that doesn't have blind spots. And while it's those things that is like an obviety, it's sometimes worthwhile mentioning because hell, we all have our blind spots. So I always ask when I'm in team calls and stuff, is there anything I'm not seeing here?
Yeah.
We present everything like, and then is there anything I'm not seeing? Because no matter, even if you're working within a team, you will encounter things that we don't know what we don't know. And then when you're a freelancer, you're a solopreneur, you get stuff assigned and then and figure it out. That's why I hire you for, right? And so for yourself, not being a nomad and not being in an in-house team, how do you stay current? Where do you learn from? How do you go about connecting with people, staying sharp, finding those pieces that will fill your gaps?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I have a few Slack groups. One is one that I just found on Reddit and it's a copywriting group. And I connect with people there and I ask questions. That's a big thing. I think a lot of freelancers are almost scared to ask questions because they think, well, if I have to ask a question, then it means I don't know. And if I don't know, then I'm not an expert. And so they just don't bother asking. But you need to ask those questions because that's how you get answers. And people aren't going to actually think that you're not an expert if you're asking questions. That's a big thing is I actually interact with people and ask them questions. And then, yeah, just joining communities, actually talking with people, forming relationships. It's simple. It takes courage to do that because you're used to being by yourself and not talking to people. So yeah, but just branching out and just trying to make those connections with other people. It's huge.
This brings me to an idea that I had quite hot in my mind over the last few months.
Yeah.
It's the idea of the third place. What you described to me sounds like a digital hangout
Mhm.
that is in lieu of having a workspace where you can mingle with coworkers that will be sharp around all the areas that are ancillary to what you do. And also within a team, but you don't
Yeah.
have a team, you're a freelancer, right? For agency owners, your team is the team that does the executional parts, right? Or maybe they direct a specific segment, but you don't have like your peers. Your peers are all the agency owners, which means it's all
Exactly.
the businesses, and you need to go and just find them and be likable
Yeah.
because you might be the direct competitor. So now, however, this still lives with the gap of the third place, right? So we already have this, the idea of the third place. You're familiar with the concept?
No, I haven't heard that before.
So the third place used to be, we have a home where we do our life things. Then we have our workspace. And then we have the third place, which is where we hang out.
Oh, no, I have heard of this. And I've heard how it's diminishing now. We don't have that anymore. I heard of that a couple weeks ago, actually.
Like for some people, there is not even a second place
Yeah.
because you work from home. I guess it depends a lot of what kind of culture you come from and your
Yeah.
geographical location, who you have around yourself physically to mingle with.
Mhm.
I think the statistics somewhere in the UK says like over 50% of people say they don't even have a single friend
Yeah.
that they
Wow.
can consider a
Yeah.
friend that they can call at any time, right? And it'll change across countries, of course, but what I'm seeing increasingly more, and I'm just bringing this up because you mentioned the vacuum that you experience professionally, right, as a freelancer,
Mhm.
thinking we know that also happens at the personal level,
Yeah.
right? In a way, finding those online communities to get those professional connections and that advice and is at this point an absolute necessity
Yeah.
for online professionals. So there's a price to pay for working from home.
Yeah.
I think there's multiple prices to pay. One is that you work from home, so you don't even have a physical, and that's why people go to coffee shops and co-working spaces. Like,
Yeah.
I don't go to an office, so I pay for my own one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that used to be a benefit. It used to have, the benefit was that you go to somewhere and they give you a laptop.
And they
They
give you
somebody else
coffee. The
pays.
coffee machine's there.
Yes,
Yeah.
somebody else pays for the aircon.
Yeah.
Somebody else pays for the electricity. You don't have to buy all your own gear.
Yeah.
And now we don't have any of that stuff. So
Yeah. Also mention a good point. You said how with agencies, and it's similar to with freelancers, how they're also your competition. And so that kind of brings like a dissonance about when you're trying to put yourself out there, because then that is in the back of your mind. Oh, but they are a competitor. How much do I say? How much information can I give them? What kind of questions can I ask? Just those types of things. But personally, what I've found is that even though a lot of my connections would technically be classified as my competition, and I don't know what it's like for agencies, but with freelancers, there's a very tight knit community, and having those connections has never taken away a job from me. It's given me opportunities because when they
mhm,
can't take on work or when a project's not fit for them, they'll reach out to someone else in their network. And so it's never once been an issue where it has sacrificed my business having these connections. But I think that a lot of people do have that worry. Oh, they are technically my competition. So should I be reaching out to people like that? But from my experience, yes, you absolutely should, because it's not really, yeah, they're not there to hurt your business for the most part.
yeah. And unless you serve the smallest, most
Yeah,
niche audience in a tiny geo, the pie is big enough. And if you're
exactly.
good, that's something like literally one of our direct competitors in the building once, we were talking and it's, yeah, don't worry, like the pie is big enough. Of course, I'll tell
Yeah,
you how to do this little thing, or like respect.
yeah,
And it's interesting because when, I guess if you're dealing with somebody that's a bit of a low quality individual, they might take an advantage out of that and be
yeah. It's
nasty.
always going to be
But
that chance.
I would say most decent people will remember that one time that somebody that you thought was a competitor actually acted like a friend, like a
Yeah,
fellow. And they're like, okay, I'll help you out next time.
yeah,
And I would say personally, all the business breakthroughs that I had over the last year and a half have been from people that I would have believed 2 years ago that they were competitors.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very similar to me. Like any big breakthrough that I've had with my business has never come from just me working by myself. It's come from me talking to people and them sharing information with me, and then something just clicks. And it gives me this big breakthrough that I'm like, I would never have got that had we not had this conversation.
So now I want to get into a bit more of the weeds of the role of a copywriter and what the experience is like. And because you do also come from a background on SEO, right?
Yeah.
What would you say when you're writing copy? What goes through your mind when you're writing a long piece on a piece of software, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever face any sort of ethical challenges or questions around, is this even a software worth promoting or writing this about? Like, how do you navigate
Yeah.
those things if they happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's something that a lot of copywriters deal with. Maybe let's take a step back quickly just for people who don't know the difference between content and copy and clarify those two. So content is just anything, like it could be blog posts. It's more top of the funnel, middle of the funnel stuff. So blog posts, social media captions, social media posts, things like that. Whereas copy has more of a sales aspect to it. So you're trying to get people to buy your offer. So like a landing page, a sales page, ads, emails, things like that. So when we're talking about copy and writing something where we want people to buy the product, there are definitely ethical concerns. And for me personally, I just wouldn't want to work with a brand if there's going to be any internal conflict. I think a lot of copywriters also have that stance, but then of course there's people who they need to make money, they need to pay their bills, and I understand that too. And so there's a lot of nuance with it. And I think especially with marketing, you have to be working or you should be working with products and with clients that you believe in and you stand behind because it'll just make your life easier if you are. But like I said, that's not always an option. And I understand that. And I would never knock someone down if they're in a position where they can't be.
No, certainly. I would presume that it's easier to, I'm mentioning this as well because you specifically wrote in your bio, this is persuasive copy. And I would believe you would have an easier time persuading somebody about something that you actually do believe in.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes through naturally in your copy too. You're not going to be sitting there and having those blocks where you can't think of a good way to say something. When you really do believe in something, I just wrote some copy for something, a product that I personally really wanted to get, and I'm still considering it. And yeah, it made writing it so much easier because I was like, I'm their target market. I'm someone who wants this, and I don't have to sit there and think, I don't have to sit there and try and put myself in the other person's shoes. Like I'm already in their shoes. And so it was much easier. Exactly.
Where do you stand with AI on the subject of copy?
So when AI first came, like last year was when I first started to dip my toes into AI and use it. I find that it's okay for writing blog posts when you go back and edit it a lot. There's a lot of editing that needs to be done. Yeah, it can spit out some okay writing, but like I said, you need to edit it a lot. When it comes to copy, copy is very you need to be very knowledgeable with your audience. You need to be knowledgeable with their pain points. You need to phrase things specific ways and order things specific ways. I think that AI just doesn't have the capacity to do that quite yet. I haven't seen any copy that could pass straight out of AI. I think it's good for ideas and good for helping you overcome blocks, but I don't know.
For, I concur, right? Like right now, I think particularly ChatGPT, which is probably the most widely used, is so easy to tell that something was written with ChatGPT.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think the AI built-in detector in people's brains is going to get attuned very quickly. And as soon as you see a word like elevate or
Yep.
landscape, I'm not even reading the rest of the article. And however, I find it a little bit scary, the speed in which it's evolving. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call it intelligence. It's also wouldn't be arrogant enough to call it a collection of glorified if statements, like some people do.
Mhm.
Somewhere in between. So I don't write I write about SEO, but for me, it's just like talking, right?
Yeah.
About SEO. It makes no difference what the format is. But I am a writer. I do creative writing. And so I post a while back that said, I want AI to do my dishes and my laundry so I can spend more time writing and painting. I don't want AI to paint and
Yeah.
write so
Yeah.
I can spend more time doing my dishes. Where do you see AI moving, and what's your stance on what could happen potentially to we saw a lot of content agencies shutting their doors last year. And now with Google changing their stance on SEO, reopening their doors. And where do you see this going?
Oh, that's something I hate to think about. I think a lot of writers will agree that it gives them a lot of stress to think about the potential of AI. If you had asked me this question last year at this time, I was panicking last year at this time, thinking that I was going to lose most of my work. But to be honest, I was very fortunate that I didn't actually lose any work to AI. I know a lot of writers who did. I just happened to get lucky, I think. So I think where it's going, what I hope is that companies can use it more for less for content creation, more for ideation. I think it can be really useful in that aspect, possibly even reviewing the content that you are going to post and finding the gaps or the pitfalls, what's missing in the content, using it as a second set of eyes, so to say. But definitely not leaning on it for creation and leaning on it for other ways. That's what I would hope to see. But like you said, it is growing really fast and it's changing really fast. And so it's really hard to tell, I guess, what will happen with it. But I think people will always appreciate that human element to content. And like you said, right now it's easy to spot that AI written content and people just retract from it. They don't love it. They don't connect with it. So I think I would like to still see lots of human elements when it comes to the actual creation of the process.
No, likewise. I have a lot of thoughts about AI that are on the reserved camp.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people. I've interviewed people on the channel that are very AI positive, very bullish on the idea. I'm bullish on the good places that it can go, but I'm extremely conscious of the places where it could go and not be good
Yeah.
for humanity. I'm curious to know where your stance on creativity as a whole is,
Mhm.
because you mentioned that AI could be best for ideation. Do you think there's anything new under the sun ever?
I don't know. I was having this conversation the other day with someone about how it's difficult to find completely new ideas. I think that there's still lots of ideas that can be uncovered, but how often those like brand new ideas can come around. I think there's a lot of improvements that can be done on the current ideas that we have. And yeah, I don't know where I stand on that. That's a very wishy-washy answer, but I don't know where I stand.
You're fine. The reason I'm asking is I do perhaps a bit too much of this, but I love the idea of a shooting star. So you get something that is here and then you try to throw something that's completely wild to it
Yeah.
and then try to bring it back to something that's normal
Yeah. I
and
like
see
that.
if it rings within the box, like whether you capture the star or not.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you don't capture anything. But so going back to the idea of copy, and this could be the Spanishness in me. This could be because I was, raised in a family of artists. But I love some original fresh copy. I love, I've never read anything like this
Yeah.
before. So there is frameworks within copy that are proven.
Yeah.
And I know, and I follow it. And, I do read the emails because I'm learning stuff. Now
Mhm.
you run a newsletter called The Art of Yes.
Yes.
How to get people to say yes through copy.
Mhm.
Give me a little bit of what's proven to work that doesn't require to find anything new under the sun.
Yeah.
And then let's see if you can throw some shooting stars to that and find stuff.
Okay. Something that's proven to work. Obviously, the big one, the main one is just digging at the pain point that your reader has and dimensionalizing that pain point. So, really painting a picture of what it looks like and then transferring over to your product and again, dimensionalizing how your product solves that pain point for them. That's a very basic one. And that's what all copy distills down to.
What do you mean by dimensionalizing?
So, dimensionalize is just so you have your pain point. So imagine it, say, trouble waking up in the morning. So that's a very one dimensional pain point, trouble waking up in the morning. But then you can add dimensions to it. So you could say something like, you constantly press snooze for an hour. So that's a dimension of trouble waking up in the morning. Or your eyes are burning when you try to them in the morning. So that's another dimension of having trouble to wake up in the morning. So you just try to paint a good picture of what that pain point actually looks like and how it feels so that the reader really relates to it.
Right. So basically what you're looking for is this, oh my God, yes, that's me.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So let's say that you managed to describe this avatar by dimensionalizing the problem. And I'm reading to the beginning of the copy and it says, oh my God, yes, that's me.
Uh-huh.
What's step 2?
So step 2 so they're going through the copy. They're saying, yes, that's me. Yes, that's me to your pain points that you're listing. And then there's different approaches, but usually you would then show them your solution. So then you show them the solution and again, dimensionalize it, show how it's going to solve that problem for them. And through the how, there's different ways. You could show testimonials, you could highlight all of the research that was involved with developing your product. There's different things and there's multiple things that people will do within their landing pages, but essentially that's what the next step would be.
What's your favorite?
I like to have testimonials and that kind of UGC content or UGC, just because it gives a really human approach to it. And it also shows that you're being genuine and authentic. So like we mentioned earlier, how copywriters might not want to work for products that they don't align with or that they have an ethical dilemma with. But I think when you can actually incorporate UGC and testimonials, it gives that human element that shows this is actually a good product. Look, other people like it. And when it's genuine testimonials, they can be very powerful. So I like having that human element to it.
Is there ever too much of those two things? I'm asking because I have a handful of landing pages in my mind that I've gone through recently where they really got me to the point of, yeah, I get it. I said out loud, yeah, I get it. Where's the price? Right?
Yeah.
Of basically this painting the pain and then this happened and what about it? Then you did, and then you try this and this didn't work and then you try that and then this didn't work and then you paid for this thing and then it was shit. And then testimonial review, another video, another testimonial, 500 reviews.
Yeah.
When is it too much?
That's definitely going to depend on your audience. And like you said, like eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, this is too much. Like, I just want to know the price. That is when it's useful to have something like heat maps installed on a landing page so that you can collect that data and actually see how people are interacting with the landing page. Ultimately, there's no way to know when people are going to get tired beforehand. As copywriters and marketers, we give our best guess. We give our best guess just by knowing the audience and by doing research beforehand. But at the end of the day, we don't know how it's going to perform until we do those tests. And so that's why it's really important to continue. Once you write the landing page or the copy, you're not done the job. You ultimately need to test that and then see what tweaks need to be done. So if you see that people are only scrolling to a certain part of their page and then they're dropping off and leaving, that's a really good indication that they didn't get the information that they needed before that point. And you might need to tweak a few things and rework things so that, like you said, they don't get that feeling of, oh, okay, like just tell me how much it is, or I'm getting bored, like I'm going to leave. You want to give them the information that they want when they want it. And so it's really important to test your landing pages, test your copy. It's an iterative process. It's never just done.
Don't presume that you added enough proof.
Yeah.
And it's just let the audience tell you if they just start scrolling like crazy, like, okay, enough, right? That, yes, I get it. Yes, that's me. I'm in pain. I get you guys have the shit. Please tell me the price, right? Which I would assume that's pretty much what we want, right? For them to say, yes, please help me fix this thing. I get you guys are great. Just tell me how much, right?
Yeah.
Now, in one of the issues that you sent, I'm collecting from memory, please pardon me for the inaccuracy. I remember there was simple words over fancy ones.
Yeah.
Point. Okay. Now, this is the question that I had around creativity and anything new under the sun.
Yeah.
You know the brand Liquid Death?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Is it an energy drink or is it?
They sell freaking water.
I was going to say, is it water? Yeah.
It's water that's canned and advertised like it's some sort of like quintessential marble extracted from a rock in Mars, which is just freaking water. But the angle that they go through is so contrarian, right? And so they go fancy on the wording and everything. They go big and heavy because it's a whole play. To understand that they're betting on that coherence by the pairs of opposites. Yeah. It's coherent because they've gone so far on the pair of opposites. But the question that I have is, in which cases would you say there is room or actually a good case for going out of the standard, say with fifth grade words
Yeah.
and blah, 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 and one lines and etc. At what point do you think, or is there any industry where you say copy that reads like copy is counterproductive
Yeah.
and then you should go and just be fancy? Does that
Yeah.
ever happen?
Not with me, not in the industries that I'm in. I think when you're serving a general audience, and by general, I don't mean everyone. I'm mostly working with an audience of business owners and entrepreneurs. And that's not to say that they're not intelligent by any means. But when you're dealing with such a wide range, you're looking to just make your work accessible to as many people as possible. So I think that when you can have a bit more freedom with creativity and the language that you use is when you have that very niche audience. And it's going to depend on what the product is that you're selling. But yeah, when you have a very niche audience and you have a niche product, you'll want to tailor your language to how that audience speaks. And if they are using like the $10 words, the bigger words, then obviously you want to be using those in your copy. It's just in most cases, you're not going to, but obviously there will be exceptions. I can't think of any off the top of my head, any brands that would fit in that box. I don't know if you can think of any, but
Yeah, I was thinking the same. When it's something that's hyper niche, right? So
yeah.
let's say you're within survival, right? And then within survival, you're into prepping and bunkers and like doomsday and so
Yeah.
forth. That you start pointing towards a particular set of people that
Hmm.
also have shared beliefs and commonalities and so forth. So you can really speak lingo,
Yeah.
right, for them. And now I would believe, because I write about SEO and I talk about SEO, right? But I like to talk about SEO for the common man. Like just SEO is just content and backlinks. We can make it fancier, but we don't need to,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to get crucified for saying online that SEO is just content and backlinks, even though there's the whole meme. There's like a bell curve, right? It's like the guy just starts and says, "Oh, so SEO is content and backlinks, right?" And
Yeah.
then it's
Yeah.
like the frustrated in the middle, like that has all this list of all the things that are SEO, and then at the very end, it's like when you're like so done with it,
Yeah.
it's the backlinks.
Yeah.
There's nuance, there's details. That's where the devil lives, but it's just the same. So within copy, is it just pain and proof?
I think if you were to boil it down, yeah, basically.
Pain and proof.
Yeah.
Now, if we were to throw a shooting star, I think, okay, in SEO right now, the state of affairs is big brands rank for everything, even when the copy is a straight up mockery of the SERPs. I don't know if
Yeah.
you read the article. I forgot the brand, but basically they wrote best printers for 2024. And it's just like, just buy whatever the latest brother I told you last year. And the article was a whole joke about like how they can rank for everything on SEO.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to stay up for too long. And if Google really want to move somewhere where they are truly favoring the users will vote with their clicks.
Yeah.
And they've been voting with the clicks and it's been part of the algorithm for a long time. From a copywriter standpoint, what expert tips do you have to really drive the click forward and go on next? We said, yes, we have to convince the person that they're reading something that addresses themselves. Yep, that's for me. You have to convince them that the company offering the content has a solution. How do you actually get them to click?
Getting them to click. I think you really need to make sure that every point of the landing page or the sales copy, I use landing page because that's what I'm just picturing in my head right now, but every point of the sales copy resonates with them, every single sentence. And to get to that point, you need to really understand your audience. You need to do lots of research. So personally, for me, if I am tasked with writing a landing page for someone, I'll spend several weeks doing research, diving into the audience. I'll talk to the sales teams and see if they have any interviews, transcripts that I can read through. I basically want to figure out how this audience talks, what they do in their spare time. You just really want to have that good understanding of who you're writing for, because when you have that, then you can make sure that every single sentence you write will appeal to them, because you want them to go through what they're reading and say, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I get that. As soon as they say, oh, no, that's not me, then you risk them leaving and not clicking onto the next or moving on to the next stage. So just really important to understand who you're talking to. I think that a lot of people, when they go to write a landing page, they forget that step and they just start with the writing. Whereas it's really important to take a step back and say, okay, I actually need to spend some time researching who I want to talk to. And yeah, that's such a crucial step.
You've done this for a long time. I'm pretty sure you have your fine-tuned process of doing this research, your places that you go for the info to figure out exactly what they use. What's your research process like?
So I'll usually talk with the teams that I'm writing for. I'll see what they have internally. Often they'll have interviews that I can listen to. I'll talk to their sales facing teams and see what kind of insight they've gathered over the years. Usually I sit down with the teams and we'll have a 2 hour question and answer period where I just go through all the questions that I have and see what they have versus what I need to uncover what's missing. I'll also do a lot of research. Reddit is a great place to go and learn about specific personas. You can search through certain subreddits and see what questions people are answering or what questions people are asking, how they're answering those questions, what language they use. You can see how, like, the severity of their pain points and what they like how they want to solve those pain points. You can use resources like SparkToro to get deeper audience insight, reading product reviews to see what people liked about certain products, what was lacking, what they did, and what they want in a product. Other audience or other communities like Facebook groups, Slack channels, Discord channels. There's just so many places that people hang out online. It's really easy to get research. And then obviously, if you have the opportunity to talk with customers, there's tools like Hotjar has a user interview tool. So you can actually set up interviews with different personas. You don't need to know them either. They have a bank of people that you can select. And so you would just have interviews with your target persona that way. That's really useful. Surveys, if you can
Mhm.
get access to survey data. Yeah, there's tons. There's tons of places that you can get info online. It's just, yeah.
It's so interesting because for most people that are building content sites that are SEO content sites right now, I've gotten whacked on the last few updates, but they still serve a purpose, even if it's just to collect leads to then run through an email and send them a course or whatever.
Yeah.
And the way SEOs have been cranking out these content machines have been get a keyword, run it to something like Surfer SEO or Pop, get an outline, just go and fill these blanks,
Yeah.
right? But that doesn't necessarily develop room for then a writer to really embed in all this knowledge of the persona and the avatar and really answer the questions that should actually be answered and not so much, what, the SEO outline is saying.
Yeah.
When you're writing content that's not so much like landing page copy,
Mhm.
but content, how do you marry both? How do you marry that? Yep, this is the outline, this is the briefs, this is what they asked me to do, or this is the blanks that I need to fill with versus this is what I know I need to put on the page. How do you marry those two?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. When writing content, if we take a step back, that level of research that I was talking about isn't ever expected from a content writer to write a piece of content. That would be completely unreasonable. But I find the advantage of working for me as a writer, working with the same clients in a similar niche, or if you have a site of yours, understanding that one specific audience, you get to know that audience over time. So you know how to infuse that audience research into the content that you're writing. But I think when you're given an outline, as a writer, it's important to push back when you don't think that something should be there or when you think that something's missing. Just having the confidence to say, hey, I know this audience and we're skipping some steps here. I know that they wouldn't know a certain important part of the steps that we're talking about. And I think maybe we should go back a little bit and include a section on this. Just being able to tell your client that is really valuable for them if you have that insight. Yeah, I think it's just knowing what your audience needs and what level you should write at for them and knowing what you need to include in the content and being able to have that keen eye when you're looking through an outline that you've been given.
How do you feel when you see an ad, right? For something that's actually interesting, you tap on it and you're reading the copy. And at that moment, you have the buyer hat on,
Yeah.
but you're a persuasive copywriter, you're a good
Mhm.
one. How's the experience? Because I know what I feel when I look at websites. I always look at any website from an SEO.
Yeah.
What's the experience like for you?
Oh, I'll put it into my swipe files and mark why I like it, and I'll get all excited. But yeah, I think as a reader, it's nice when something actually resonates with you. I think that's a good feeling. And I know people are hesitant on ads. There's ads everywhere. And so we have ad fatigue. But when there is that one ad that really gets you, it makes a difference. We're just so used to seeing ads that don't get you, that aren't relevant. And so when there is that one that does, it makes a huge difference. And yeah, it makes you want to buy the product even more, I would say, because we're not used to that. We have so many ads thrown at us all the time. It's nice when something speaks to you.
It's interesting that you went to put the focus on I was maybe I framed the question weirdly. I meant to like when you're looking at the sales page as a copywriter.
Yeah.
But now that you mentioned the ads, where is the most money in copywriting? Writing landing pages, writing ads, or
So when you write a sales page, you might be done at that point. Like you write your sales page. There is a lot of money in writing sales pages, but you write one, and then if it works, which is great, but if it works, that they don't really need you anymore. The client doesn't need you. So then maybe they'll have another product, but let's just say they have one product. So they got one landing page from you. You write that, you're done. That project's over with. And so that can be a lot of money up front, but then it's not recurring. Whereas something like emails don't pay as much per email as a landing page, say, but brands are constantly sending out emails. So you get that recurring income. And then ads can pay a lot. But again, if they just have the one ad and you're not writing multiple ads over and over, then it's just that one project. Sometimes copywriters will get royalties from the ads that they write. And so then that can give them a source of recurring income. That can also be very tricky to track. So it's a balance with that, whether you can even trust the client to tell you how many leads and sales they actually got from the ads. And if you want to be following up with that, and if the client wants to go that route with you. But I would say it's just a matter of what you like to do. If you're a writer trying to decide what you want to do, like cold emailing, do you like prospecting, do you like networking, then you might you might want to lean towards landing pages where you're writing, it's not recurring work, but it's a bigger project. And then, yeah.
it's interesting that you mentioned royalties because I had that question in my mind. Now, SEO is pretty much an absurd industry to do this on, but in many industries, it's true, which is the performance-based work, right? So if the work doesn't work, I don't get paid. If the work works, I get paid very handsomely, right?
Yeah.
Does that ever make sense as a copywriter to say, I won't charge you, but I'll make an X percentage of whatever the landing page makes over the lifetime? Any companies open to that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
What's
And
your
that's the
experience
thing.
there?
That used to be a big thing years ago, more so with direct response copywriting, with like letters that would get sent out. That was big royalties. I personally haven't ever come across an instance where a client wanted to offer me a royalty. I think it's something I would like to experiment with if I was ever given that opportunity. None of the copywriters in my network have ever worked with royalties either. And from what I've gathered from talking with them, it's not super common currently. And I think it's also, I don't know. I'd have to really have a good relationship with the client before accepting that royalty, because you are ultimately depending on them to be honest with you and tell you how well your work is performing. And if your work is performing really well and they're looking at the numbers and thinking, oh, this is a lot of money to be given away to this person, are they going to be honest with that? And you really need to trust that they will be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's definitely not as common as it used to be.
Interesting. And now, as a freelancer, right? I'm sure you know impervious to the feast and famine
Mhm.
cycles because they like the reality of not having. If you have obviously, I know your work and you
Yeah.
with rosters and all these different things, but ultimately that's the whole point of working with freelancers is like when you have the demand, you put it out, don't you pull it back. What kind of offer would have to cross the desk of a really good persuasive copywriter that has a long roster and no need to ever marry any particular client to get directly involved into business as a copy partner? not so much like as an employee, but like a direct partner.
Yeah.
How good would the opportunity have to be? Because I know there's a lot of money to be done in copywriting and just freelancing. So,
Yeah. It definitely depends on the copywriter. I know there's some who six figures would be a good enough offer that would give them the stability that they want, and they would be willing to sacrifice their work-life balance for that kind of stability. I know others who would probably never accept that because it's just not something that they would ever want for themselves. For me personally, I don't know what offer I would accept, to be completely honest. If I would have to give up, say I would have to give up all of my client work, maybe except for one client, if I could keep one client on, and then partner with a company. I don't know. I do value the balance that freelance life gives me. And yeah, I don't know.
I guess it's a tough one because
Yeah.
the balance is quite a thing.
Yeah.
There is, in my opinion, I mean, there's a lot of more voices right now that are adding a bit more balance to the ideas, right? But there's been a glorification of the hustle and building and entrepreneurship and stuff
Yeah.
for a while. And there's now a bit more voices that right now like saying, just prepare to lose a lot of hair and gain a lot of weight and not have a lot of sleep. And maybe you do that for years and you still don't see anything come through, right?
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people leaning on the camp of, I'd rather have a life, thank you. And yeah, I think that's an important one to take into account. And so here would be the question, right? Have you ever felt there was an offer or for a copy or for something, for a product? Well, am I selling my soul? Have you ever asked yourself, like, am I selling my soul in this particular deal? You ever felt that?
What do you mean?
Someone asks you to write a piece of copy for something that you sincerely think is a piece of shit, but the
Okay.
offer
Yeah.
is great. And that, those kind of situations, like, this is terrible, but like, pays are awesome. Something like we mentioned earlier. Or, oh God, I'm going to have to like literally work on this gigantic series of 10 landing pages for 2 months and have no life. And it's like a breaking of what you stand for, what you've decided that you want to live your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
The offer is good.
Yeah.
You ever been on
Mm,
those kind of,
no, I actually haven't. I feel very lucky to have never been in a position like that. I think for me, the biggest problem, so like you said, like a good offer comes on your desk and now all of a sudden you're working all the time. Like you mentioned that. That's definitely more so what I've experienced rather than having to work with a client where I don't stand behind what I'm doing. I would say my issue is more kind of the time management side of things and maybe taking on more than I can actually, like more than I have capacity for. But even then, I've never been in a situation where I've been working like day and night, 7 days a week. I still have that time where I can unplug and rest and collect myself and power through the project. And then I'm like, okay, I'll take a week after and just let things settle. So I would say through my career, there's been always a pretty good balance, which I'm obviously fortunate and thankful for.
no, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for context, I've run a very busy agency for the last 2 years of my life, which is giving most of my white hairs. And yeah, when it's obviously it's worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
But I always think we never know, right?
Yeah.
We never know exactly at what point do we need to bring more balance into the equation.
Mhm.
And when I speak with people that very clearly, because it's clear in the way you talk that you have chosen balance
Mhm.
and there's reasons why you've chosen freelance and you've not chosen in-house and all these different things and why, even if you have to navigate the things that, you don't have that network, you have to go and find it online and so forth. There's clearly a win in the equation for you to stand with the choice of balance.
Mhm.
And I like it. I like it that, oh yeah, the hassle, the more. And it's a good, it's a good balance as well, because all of the people that speak on the podcast are like, go more,
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
sleep, more work.
Yeah. No, I get that totally. One thing that I've done for the past 2 years is at December around the holidays, I take a big chunk of time off. My first year, I took 6 weeks off. And then the next year, yeah, I found that was too long because when it was time to get back into work, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was like, I can't take 6 weeks off again because I just had too much fun and I didn't want to work. But then the following year, which was this past year, I took about 3 weeks off, 2.5 weeks, and that was really nice. It was like the perfect balance. I was ready to start working after that, and yeah, and I think maybe if someone is the type of person who likes to work, because some people, that's what they like to do and that's what fulfills them. But I do believe that we all still need that time off. And so maybe if someone's like that, then they might consider just taking a big chunk of time off at some point in the year rather than trying to balance themselves out throughout the day or throughout the week.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely an understated value on taking even just 5 days off, right? Like literally the
Yeah.
weekend plus 3 extra days. Did that last week for the first time in quite a while. I do normally do work the weekends, either agency stuff or some ancillary things, and bit of the price to pay for the position. But and there is also a component of guilt of ever taking time off,
Yeah.
right? Because the list of things to do is always expanding; it's never shrinking.
Yeah.
Right, particularly the better that you do, then the more things that you want to go for, and then also if you're having a rough patch, then you can't like just ever justify that. I want to take 2 days off. So whether you're at the top or you're in a bad one, like you can't really justify the time off. But I found some of the best ideas that I come up with the last 4 or 5 months in where to bring the business have been because of I forced myself to take some time off. So it's definitely understated value on full blown disconnect to really let the brain breathe.
Yeah.
Then it's so hard to regain momentum.
One thing that I was just going to say too, because you had said that it's hard to take time off because there's that growing list of things. And also, I think, and I don't know if you do this, but I do like an opportunity cost almost in my mind where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be taking 2 weeks off. And so that 2 weeks equals how much pay, how much work will I have to say no to take those 2 weeks off. So this 2 weeks is going to cost me this much. And if I don't want it to cost me anything, then how will I shift my schedule so that I can cram all of my work into the preceding 2 weeks and get all of my work done so that I can take these 2 weeks off without losing out on too much. I think that also makes taking time off like pretty stressful as a agency owner or a freelancer. And yeah.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope as well. When you just said,
Yeah.
like I get the principle, and very few times that I've been able to apply it, I've been happy. But it's also, oh, let me cram this thing up, and then I go and I slap myself off for 3 weeks and get an insane amount of stuff done. And what if I work like this all the time?
Yeah.
Then we'll be really growing.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
true.
at some
Actually, I
point,
haven't
like
thought about that, but yeah, absolutely. Then you
you
get
wake up in the
really
morning
put
and
in
like,
this situation.
my body hurts. I don't know. Whoever tells you this work-life balance, unless you force the balance somehow,
Yeah,
either
you have
by
to build
strong
it in and get used to it.
boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't happen. I think that's one of the understated benefits of having a job is unless you work for an insane company, right? If you work a 9 to 5 and you have weekends off, work-life
And
balance is
paid
built in.
vacations.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said just like a European, assuming that's the most normalist thing in the world. But then
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
I know
Not everyone has that.
for the friends in the US, it might be a little bit different.
Yeah. 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 Ugh, I know what you mean though. You do get a bit more. Yeah. Grass is always greener.
Well, it's been a fun episode. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
That was fun. That was the first time I've done an interview, I think in 4 years. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. Thank you for
Well,
asking me. I
glad to
appreciate
maybe opening a season of interviews for you.
Yeah.
I think definitely with the newsletter, more will come. It's a good one. For
Thank you.
those watching, where should they go to subscribe to The Art of Yes?
Oh, so if you go to dananicoledesigns.com/art-of-yes, which isn't the greatest URL at the moment, but that's where you can go. Or if you just go to dananicoledesigns.com, right on my homepage, there'll be a form. So just sign up anywhere on my
Awesome.
website.
Besides there, where else can people find you?
I am on LinkedIn for the most part, just Dana Nicole on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. And
Brilliant. Lana, thank you very much for being in the query.
yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure.